Okay, carbohydrates. What about that? We got fats now. We're not going to worry about fats. Carbohydrates. Next slide. Okay. This is a really important thing. And of course, it's not just for women, but the jewel pound refers to the abode of female immortals. So if you mix and smoke and fire, your body will not walk in the jewel pound. They're saying if you cook your food. Immortal body should be pure, clear spirit. If you do not abstain from cooked food, then ordinary mercury and murky energy will go in your body. So this is kind of, it's written more by women, but this is the teaching in the Taoist approach. Next slide. Okay. Bigu, they don't recommend eating grains. The avoidance of grains goes back to 475 BC. It's still part of modern Taoism. Next slide. So that's just a little hint about grains because it's high carbohydrate. And we'll talk about fructose for a moment. And what we need to understand is immediately fructose doesn't raise your blood sugar, but in the long term, it really accelerates diabetes. So, and that's Gary Taubes put it, and because it gets converted, carbohydrate gets converted into fat and causes insulin resistance. And the fat blocks insulin function in the cells. Next slide. So I got more into this because of my work with diabetes. So it directly causes, it's associated with diabetes, especially with doing the high fructose corn syrup. And next slide. So incidence of diabetes increased 90% in the 2 years in the 1980s when it was introduced. High fructose corn syrup. Big problem. Next slide. And it also is associated with more liver disease, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Next slide. So they have 2 to 3 times more fructose with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So it's got fatty liver disease, it accelerates diabetes, cancer, and actually affects mental function. The glia cells in the brain are 10 times worse with fructose than with glucose. Next slide. Okay, fructose is 10 times more active in creating ages than glucose. Next slide. So cancer cells use fructose 10 times more than glucose. So now we're getting a little understanding of this. So how much is safe? Next slide. We're going to look at that. Basically, it also creates 10 times more inflammation in the brain. Go ahead, next slide. So we want between 15 and 25 grams a day that we can handle of fructose. Next slide. Okay. So we don't want to go over 25 grams. Next slide. So this is what excess fructose, and we think it's innocent because it doesn't immediately raise your blood sugar. You got heart disease, high blood pressure, obesity, gout, kidney stones, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, brain inflammation, cancer, accelerated aging. Next slide. So inflammation is the big thing, and that's the gluten and the high carbohydrate diet. Next slide. That's the grain brain. So at high carbohydrate, our blood sugar will accelerate brain shrinkage. We call it type 3 diabetes. Next slide. The brain shrinks a certain percent, but this accelerates it. So it's about double the people who are kind of the highest kind of tendency with diabetes. So, and depression. Next slide. Oh, okay. So David Perlmutter said it pretty good in the Grain Brain. A diet heavy in inflammatory carbohydrates and low in healthy fat messes with the mind in more ways than one. I think he said it pretty well. Next slide. That's why I quoted him. Nature made sugar hard to get, man made it easy. And that's part of our problem in our world today. Next slide. So what's my suggestion? 25 to 45% plant diet. This is general suggestion. You have to figure out whether you're 25 or 45. 10 to 20% protein, 25 to 40% carbohydrate, not 70% carbohydrate. Okay, and if you're going to do diabetes, get it down to 25 to 35% carbohydrate. And that's mostly your vegetables that we're talking about. Next slide. Okay. So let's think food is energy. And again, my bottom line is, how do you feel over a long period of time? How do you feel? Not for one day, but over a few months. You make a shift, you observe. You have to experiment on yourself, and you have to kind of balance it till you get your optimum result. Next slide. And only you can do that. So here we are. The live food helps us become superconductors of the divine. Next slide. That's the Kundalini energy. So in each generation, we're given the right medicine for the world's repair. Holistic live food vegans is the medicine for healing today's world. I'll go a step further. It is the wave of the present and the future in every level. Next slide. Now, you may feel bad about the state of our world, but it will be okay because people like you are in it. Consider that, because people who are part of this conference are at the vanguard. What we do makes a difference. If we turn eating into a sacred way of living, we turn our diet and a vegan way of life, we can transform the world. Okay, next slide, please. And that's how you reach me, drcousens.com or info@treeoflife.net. And I actually still am taking new patients here in this.